Hi, Cara. How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you very much. Congratulations on such an incredible performance and film. I've been thinking about it all week since I've
Oh,
watched
thank
it.
you so much. Oh, those are such kind words. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's such a phenomenal, intense performance. And I can't wait to get into it with you. But at first, I just want to say, what drew you to the role?
So I had worked with Joshua on a short film a couple of years prior to The Calm Beyond, and I had such a great experience working with Josh. We just clicked right away, and I considered him such a dear friend of mine. And so a couple years later, he reached out to me and was like, "Hey, Kara, I am ready to shoot my first feature. Read the script." And so I was like, "Okay." So I read it, and I couldn't put it down. I read it like first page to last page, and I was so fascinated by this character of Asha. It was so wonderful to see such a fully fleshed out three-dimensional Asian heroine, in this script where there was so much depth, there was so many layers. And that's sort of what drew me to the project. I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. Josh, I have to do this. I'm coming. I'm coming on. I have to do this.
You have no other choice, Josh. It's
Yeah, literally. I don't know if you were asking me to do it, but now I'm here to do it.
you said yes though, because like I said, I can't compliment this enough. It's such an incredible performance and a really, really brilliantly written character study on a woman's survival.
Yeah.
What preparations go into creating a survival kind of like a last survivor esque movie? This woman out on her own trying to navigate this new world.
Totally. It's so crazy because we shot this film in 2019, pre-COVID, and we had no idea, obviously, then, what the shitstorm that was going to hit us, the next 2 years. And I always think about how crazy it is that, we shot it then, but the film coming out now, it hits differently. It hits differently because now everybody in the world has had some sort of relationship to the ideas of trauma and isolation in a way that we never had before. And I always think, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I shot the Calm Beyond now, how different would the character be? Because now we all know what isolation feels like, and cool. But the work, the type of preparation I put into it, like you said, thank you so much for complimenting the character study. And I will always, give my hats off to Josh, who wrote this character and really fleshed out this character and showed her experience and the themes of isolation and trauma, but also this difference between surviving and living, and how there is such a difference between those two things. The character of Asha, for so long and for most of the film, she is just surviving. And I think, a lot of us can relate to that. There's different phases of our life where it's just so easy to just survive and coast not in necessarily a good way, but you kind of just are stagnant because you're just trying to survive. But there is a difference between that and living your life, living to your fullest potential, living, for happiness and for, a variety of different reasons. And I think a lot of the work I did, I talked to Josh a lot because I know that the character of Asha was very much based on his experience of going through cancer treatment the first time. And he talked to me a lot about, feeling isolated in his experience and the trauma that going through and not knowing what's going to happen, and the calm beyond the storm of now that your life has been completely changed and shattered in so many ways, how do you pick up the pieces? And so, I had a lot of support doing the character study for this project. And yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up that it was filmed before the pandemic, because that was one of my questions. But what I enjoyed about this film is that you look at life before this all
Mhm.
happened, and
Mhm.
how kind of taking pictures on your phone and shopping feels kind of frivolous, which I think everyone can feel like, especially right now, that sometimes scrolling through social media and doing all the things that are important, like you said, to living, feels weird and wrong now. Was that like an element that you wanted to introduce, that her life before the storm was?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, the way that the script was written, which was so brilliant, is like, I feel like, we're obviously with Asha in present day, but as you get glimpses of her life before, that's when you learn, you know, like you said, that dichotomy, that contrast of, wow, this is the girl we're seeing right now, but this was the very full, for lack of a better word, life that she lived before, and how big that contrast is, you know. I think that was definitely done very intentionally, like you said, to show the bleakness of what present day is, but also sort of how vibrant life was before, but also in how, like, in so many ways, how that was Asha's choice. It was Asha's choice to stay sort of isolated in this building and to not try and go out and look for hope and all of these things. She chose to, you know, hunker down and survive because she felt like that was the best choice for her there. And then here we go, a couple of years passed, and like we were just saying before, it's just stagnant. But she also felt no purpose or didn't make the choice to go beyond that until she had a reason to, an impetus to, which is obviously when Hey comes into her life. But yeah, I thought, you know, when I finally watched the final cut of the film, how brilliant it was the way they shot it too, because even the color tones of present day versus the vibrant colors and the sounds and the people and all of those things, you know, like, yeah, exactly, shopping in a night market and the most, you know, ridiculous things we were talking about, you know, like sneaking out to like be with your boyfriend and stuff like that, you know, like the little joys. But like you said, I feel like it's very relatable to now, because sometimes we're just like, God, there's so many things happening in the world, obviously, like so many big things. And sometimes, you know, I'm on the phone like complaining about whatever stupid boy, but those are all the parts I feel like that make up what life is as well, you know?
Exactly. And it's this really beautiful moment in the film where, like, I know everyone like ridicules so many selfies and pictures, but actually when something like that happens, selfies and photos and memories are what you
Yeah.
kind of cling on to. And that's that kind of like when she picks up the picture of her sister, and then you see her taking the pictures, and you're like, well, this is what I'm doing. Like, if anything happens, then at least I've got the memories of the people that I loved.
Right. Oh my gosh, I'm going to use that next time I feel bad about taking a, you know, Instagram selfie and be like, this is documentation.
Right, documentation for me. If I get washed away by a storm, then at least I'll have Instagram.
Exactly. I will have this.
Exactly. And I really like, as you mentioned, she's like she's stagnating herself, but I love the fact that she's where she is because she's kind of tied to her grief, and it's sort of a comfort safety for
Mhm.
her. Like, if I was in the same situation, I'd probably not leave my flat because it's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Like, as you know, the story moves forward and we see, you know, it's revealed that it is her own flat, her own building, but that physical tie to grief that she cannot let go of, you know, how she is not necessarily in her own flat, but she has transformed the top 3 floors or 2 floors of this building, you know, to kind of provide to her needs, but how she cannot leave, you know, she cannot physically leave this building because of so many so many ties to, like you said, grief and trauma. And in a weird way, it's like comfort, the comfort in the grief, you know, the comfort of knowing that your family is close, you know.
Absolutely. So then when Hey comes in, I find it fascinating that Hey is a child. It's like the hope for the future comes into her life immediately, and sparks something. How was it developing this with Sariana?
Oh my gosh, Sarinna was so incredible. She was 8 years old. It's, what was I doing at 8 years old? Like, truly, like, what was I doing at 8 years old? Probably doing something stupid, like running into glass patio doors. Like, Sarinna was amazing. This was her first big feature role. And she was just so incredible. She was so natural. Obviously, when it comes to child actors, you know, so much of, you know, and, you know, I would see Josh work with her and he was so good with her as well, but is to capture their natural childlike essence. Like, you really just want them to be themselves truly on camera. They're, you know, you don't want them to act. If anything, the acting part of it probably hinders their natural childlike tendencies and instincts. But also, it's so difficult. It's so difficult when the camera is like right in front of your face to remember your lines and still be natural. You know, I mean, adults can't even do it, let alone Sarinna, or a kid who's 8 years old. So, you know, she did such an incredible job. I was blown away by her every single day. but she was lovely. She was just like the sweetest little girl. So it was wonderful to be able to work with her on set. And because it was, her first experience, I do feel like that big sister kind of instinct took over for me naturally. And it was really wonderful to kind of show her, in whatever ways I can, the ropes, for lack of a better word. She's always had a penchant for performing. She's been doing commercials since she was younger. She's in dance, and acting is something that she's definitely wants to explore. So it was really, really cool to see her in front of my eyes learning about how this works, learning about angles, learning about where to look for eyeline, learning about lighting, and just, all these things that I can see she doesn't maybe necessarily fully understand, but it is getting absorbed, So it was a really, really great experience to work with her. She was fantastic.
That's amazing. And I really love the initial Asha and Hey relationship, because like there's an instinctual need to protect a child, but also Asha sees her as a burden who completely
Yes.
can like blow open her whole sanctity, pretty much.
Yes. Oh my gosh, there's so many layers to that. And on top of that, how much she reminds her of having a little sister, and how that sort of brings up so much trauma and guilt that, I think she has buried for so long. She tries not to think about it. She just lives her life day to day, trying to survive, and those flashbacks with her own sister obviously start to bubble to the surface as she develops this relationship with Hey. And you're absolutely right. At the very beginning, it's hard for Asha to snap out of this survival mode, which is, okay, now there's another mouth to feed. She's a kid. What if she does something stupid and loud things and attracts people and we're all gonna die? How is she going to contribute to my life as when it comes to survival, right? And you're absolutely right. There's so many conflicting emotions, but also at the end of the day, Asha is, a good person in the deep depths of her soul. And, she's like, at the beginning, I feel like is very much like, okay, I'm going to save this little girl. But I think it's very clear as the film goes on that in so many ways, it was the other way around, that Hey saved her. Like Hey gave her a new purpose to live. Hey brought hope into her life. So that's sort of how that relationship kind of manifests as the film goes on.
Absolutely. And like during the final of the film, I was like, I just want another film with them. I want to see their next chapter.
That's such a great feeling. I love that.
I want to see where they go next in this kind of new water world.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I love the way the film left off, because I do feel like it gave, so much of the film is so bleak, but I think that the message at the end of the film is very clear, where, it is about hope. It is about the calm beyond the storm. And all of us have different storms that hit our lives at different points, but, it will pass and there will be hope beyond it. And it is, nice to see us kind of like sailing off and not sure where, what's on the outside of it, because I always think that I'm like, okay, so where do they sail to? Like China or like Japan, Taiwan? Where are they? Like, how much fuel do they have? But also, how much of the world is submerged? Because a secondary, I think, kind of theme of the film is very much about climate change and how much our world is changing. And if we don't take care of it, this is something could happen. And, it's very interesting to think about, like how much has the world changed in this world, in this film?
Absolutely. Speaking of which, I did want to ask, what's it like working with so much water?
Oh my gosh, I know. It's so crazy because, we had an incredible production designer, set designer, art director. Our crew was almost completely 100% Hong Kong local, and they built this incredible set. So there was a warehouse. We had, a couple floors, including the roof where we shot all of those scenes. And I was like, the logistics that came with flooding the rooms for those certain scenes, like the music room was fully flooded. I don't even know how they did it and make sure there was no leak. Like, I'm like, I can't even, like, I spill like my Tupperware, if it's not sealed properly. I don't know how they did it, but it was a rough couple of days. I'm not going to lie. I mean, the crew took such good care of me. I felt very, very supported, but I was wading around in water up to my thighs for a couple of days. You know, they condensed all those scenes into just a couple of days. But let me tell you, there were pruny feet. There were very pruny.
Was there a point where you're like, I don't want to see water ever again?
I literally was like, and you know, there were a couple of those scenes where I'm submerged underwater during some of those more physical scenes. I was like, I've honestly never been a big swimmer. Like I can swim to save my life, but I'm not like a swimmer. I mean, let me tell you, I came back to LA and like didn't go to the beach for like 2 years. I don't need any of this. Like this is fine. I'm just gonna, I can look at pictures of the beach. I don't need to go.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's great. I have a very complicated relationship with this, so I'm just gonna step over here.
That's Jaws. Like you're afraid to go back into the water. That's like another tagline for the car.
Totally.
Well, honestly, I can't wait for people to see this film. It's such an incredible performance, and like we said, a really beautifully written character at the forefront, and it's spectacularly performed by yourself. And thank you so much for talking with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for taking the time, Sarah. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey!